That would explain why so many women I know love Genshin. The threshold to enter games can be rough. There's a lot of people who didn't grow up with PCs, and that can be rough. Yeah, so this is something that doesn't just affect women, but it affects like a lot of different types of gamers as well. But one of the things that is worth thinking about as a game dev is what the next generation of players is growing up on in terms of control schemes and stuff like that. So like, as an example, I'd say one of the brilliant things that Overwatch did, when it came out, is it said, hey, this is a first-person shooter, but by the way, there's a lot of characters in this game that you do not have to be good at first-person shooting at all to play. Mercy, Winston, characters like that, right? Like, it turns out that you can master movement without necessarily mastering aim and have a good time on characters like that. And that was a really, really good thing for making Overwatch a big, popular, successful game. Because it opened up the first-person shooter genre to a ton of people who normally couldn't have enjoyed that genre. Oh! Oh, yeah. That's what I like to see, baby. Shoot, where was I? I can't even remember. My life just turned around. Oh, yeah, I was talking about Overwatch. And so, like, as an example, if you are a kid... And by the way, a lot of guys have had this happen, especially if they grow up in the early 2000s, where it's like less the case for a lot of women historically, because, you know, back in the 90s, games were marketed primarily towards young boys. But if you were a kid who grew up playing first-person shooters, a character like McCree is going to be great for you if you enjoy Overwatch. Or, wait, no, Cassidy, there we go. Or a character like Widowmaker is going to be great for you if you enjoy Overwatch, right? And you can play that because, and one of the reasons that those characters will be great for you is you probably grew up playing first-person shooters. And so you had a lot of experience from a very, very young age aiming a gun in a first-person shooter. And that's important. And so at the end of the day, most first-person shooters, if you already grew up with first-person shooters, it's pretty easy to get into a lot of first-person shooters. Because it's like, okay, well, just do what you've already been doing. But if you're someone who didn't grow up with first-person shooter mechanics, a character like Cassidy or Widowmaker is really, really, really rough to play because you don't have the years of like muscle memory. And so a character like Mercy is incredible because let's say you have a friend who like gets you into Overwatch and they're like, yo, I played this new game. It's called Overwatch. It's super sweet. I've been playing Widowmaker. And you're like, that's sweet, but I can't play first-person shooters. They can be like, well, yo, have you seen Mercy and Winston? Like, you'll love these characters. And then you can go play with your friend and have a great time. It's kind of just noting that Overwatch, by like having different control schemes that weren't standard for their FPS and having different ways players can succeed on some of these characters that weren't standard for FPS, I think was a huge advantage for the game and made it really accessible and fun for tons and tons of different people who hadn't grown up with a first-person shooter control scheme, learning that from the time they were like 3 years old. This is why I think Sage is such an essential character in Valorant. One of the reasons I think Sage is so important for Valorant is an insanely hard game to learn how to play. It's really, really, really hard in terms of learning the shooting mechanics in it. And at the very least, if you have a friend who can't play an FPS, you can put them on Sage and you can tell them, hey dude, walk behind me and heal me and throw that orbit things and res me if I die. And you can do that, and that provides a like reasonable point of entry for a game that is very, very, very hard in terms of the mechanics you need to know to like even be like competent at it. And so I'm surprise, I'm a huge fan of Sage. And so yeah, Sage is like super important because of that. And similarly, this is why I tend to feel very strongly about characters like Malphite and Garen and Sona being like good for League of Legends. You'll often hear like, you know, very top level competitive players being like, why should easy champions be in the game? And it's like, well, not everybody has the mechanics or wants to have the mechanics or would enjoy having mechanics to play Yasuo every game. But that doesn't mean they couldn't enjoy League of Legends if you gave them something that was less mechanically demanding, and just let them focus on other things they're interested in, like being good at. One of the big things that's going to be challenging for game devs coming up in the next few years, especially if they're not making games for phones. P.S. For a lot of games, phones are the future, especially in the Eastern markets. Like, just it turns out most gamers out there nowadays aren't playing on computers. That's like a pretty awkward thing to have nowadays. They're playing less on computers and consoles, more on phones. But one of the challenges that a lot of up-and-coming, like for the next generation of gamers, if you're not making games explicitly for a phone, is that a lot of gamers, like younger gamers, are iPad kids. They don't know how to use a mouse and keyboard. They don't even know how to use a controller at times, like a gamepad. They're used to manipulating a game with their fingers, like on an iPad, right? And so that's another thing that game devs, you know, in the upcoming years are going to have to be thinking really, really hard about in the upcoming years is like, what kind of control schemes are actually functional for somebody who grew up never using a mouse and keyboard, who grew up never touching a controller, and that's way, 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 way different. Like, one of the original advantages League of Legends had that is no longer an advantage and is now a detriment, but it used to be an advantage, is League of Legends uses RTS controls. Controls that if you grew up playing StarCraft and Warcraft and Command and Conquer and stuff like that, you'd be pretty familiar with. And before League came out, the RTS genre was a big deal. Many, many gamers grew up playing or understanding RTSs. Now the RTS genre is like effectively dead. Like very, very, very few people play RTSs. And so what used to be an advantage for League, in that it had a very familiar control scheme that a lot of people would have been used to based on the games they played growing up, it now has a control scheme that is very foreign to the next generation of gamers. A lot of gamers will look at like League of Legends control scheme and like not really know how to play the game or what to do. Like, I've done labs where like I'll like watch legitimate new players play the game. I'm not talking about like someone who's like a giga gamer. I'm talking about an actual new player. And a lot of people who come into this chat, they're like, they think a new player is like someone who's like, they're just bad at the game. No, dude. A real new player can't even move their character. Like, I'll watch new players who can't figure out how to move their character. And what I don't mean is they didn't try. It's not like, oh, they can't even push the right mouse button. No, it's like they'll push the right mouse button, their character will move, they'll be like, oh, okay, that moves my character, and then they'll fail to do it another time. And they'll fail to do it another time. And they'll keep trying and recognizing they're doing it wrong and try to fix it and, you know, use the right mouse button and then revert back to not doing it repeatedly. It's like, that's how foreign and weird it is to move around with the right mouse button in a game. And so like that's a thing. That's a thing that like is rough, is that, you know, if your game doesn't have a control scheme that people grew up on, it can be very, very hard for people to like actually be able to then get into and play your game. I remember back in college, you know, in 2010, I taught a friend of mine to play League of Legends. And she grew up playing MapleStory. She had not played any RTSs. She had not played League. I taught her how to play League. She works at Riot now, fun fact. But I taught her how to play League. And things that I would just take for granted, she wouldn't have a clue about. Like, I would like, when we were playing, I'd yell at her to like look at the minimap. I'd be like, you need to watch the minimap! And she'd be like, August, what's a minimap? Like, what is this concept? Of like, because, you know, she had not grown up on RTSs like I had, like with minimaps. And so, yes, it was right there, but like, she just hadn't even learned to understand what it was and what you were supposed to do with it and what you were supposed to get out of it, right? And like, that's the big deal. That's a big deal. That's important to think about. MapleStory has a minimap. Did it used to?